Snowflakes spiraled through the Chicago night like tiny, wandering ghosts. Soft, weightless, and endless. They fell over glass towers and traffic lights, blurring the edges of a city that never really slept. The air was sharp, scented faintly with roasted chestnuts from a nearby cart, and the hum of Christmas songs drifted faintly through the cold. Ethan Wilson tightened the collar of his burgundy overcoat and adjusted the scarf around his daughter's neck. "You warm enough, pumpkin?" Anna nodded, her small mittened hand snug in his. Her yellow cap bobbed as she skipped over a patch of snow, humming something off-key and cheerful. "It's so pretty, Daddy. Like magic dust." Ethan smiled faintly, though his eyes remained distant. "Yeah, magic dust." He said it softly, like someone who didn't quite believe it anymore. They walked down Michigan Avenue, where Christmas lights strung between lampposts shimmered in gold and silver. Every shop window gleamed with red ribbons and tiny glowing trees. Families laughed, lovers held hands, and the world felt warm, everywhere except inside Ethan's chest. It had been 3 years since Maya died. 3 Christmases since the laughter in their home turned hollow. And though he told himself he was healing, the truth was simpler. He just learned how to keep moving. His company, Wilson Innovations, had become one of Chicago's fastest-growing tech firms. He had the respect, the success, the penthouse overlooking the skyline. Everything except peace. Tonight was supposed to be their tradition. Just him and Anna walking to see the Christmas lights. She loved the way the city glowed in December. He loved pretending that he still did. "Dad?" Anna tugged his sleeve. "Can we get cocoa later? The kind with the little marshmallows?" "Of course," he said. It wouldn't be Christmas Eve without it. She grinned, satisfied. "And can we visit Mommy's bench after? I want to tell her about my class play." His throat tightened. The bench. The one by the riverside where he and Maya used to sit, before everything changed. "Yeah, sweetheart," he whispered. "We'll go." They turned a corner near a quiet café, whose windows glowed amber against the snow. Steam fogged the glass, and behind it, a young couple laughed over their coffee cups. Anna slowed, her gaze fixed on something outside the warm light. "Daddy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look." Ethan followed her eyes, and froze. On a park bench, just beyond the cafe window, sat a woman, slumped forward, her head bowed. Her floral dress peeked out beneath a thin, black cardigan. Snow gathered on her shoulders, melting into dark patches. In her arms, wrapped in what looked like a torn blanket, was a baby. Small, still, and frighteningly quiet. For a second, the world went silent. The city noise faded. The snow seemed to fall slower, heavier. Anna tugged his hand again. "Dad, her baby's freezing." Ethan swallowed hard. He looked around, hoping someone else had noticed. A couple passed by without glancing up. A man in a long coat hurried across the street. The world just kept moving. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to be careful. He'd read the stories, scams, setups, danger. But then he looked down at Anna's face, her eyes wide with fear and innocence. And something inside him cracked. He saw Maya in her. The same compassion, the same look she'd given him the night she made him pull over on a snowy road to help a stranded stranger. "If you can help, and you walk away," she had said, "you'll never stop thinking about it." Ethan exhaled, long and shaky. "Stay close to me," he said. They stepped closer. The snow crunched beneath their boots. The woman didn't move, only tightened her arms around the tiny bundle. Ethan crouched down in front of her. "Ma'am?" he said gently. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, startled, glassy, blue with exhaustion. "Please," she rasped. He's cold." Ethan's breath caught. The baby's skin was pale, his tiny lips quivering but making no sound. He didn't think. He just acted. He pulled off his burgundy coat and wrapped it around the baby, tucking the sides under tightly. His scarf followed, soft against the infant's cheek. The woman stared, trembling. "Don't take him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, don't take my baby." "I'm not," Ethan said softly. "I'm keeping him warm, that's all." Anna crouched beside him, eyes wide. "Is he going to be okay?" Ethan pressed his fingers gently against the baby's tiny wrist. A pulse. Faint, but there. Relief rushed through him. "He will be," he said, though his voice wavered. "He will be." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "They said they'd call social services. I ran. I couldn't let them take him." Her words trembled between them like frost in the air. "Okay," Ethan murmured, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're going to get him warm, all right? Both of you." He pulled out his phone, calling for an ambulance. As he spoke, Anna slipped her mitten off and touched the baby's cheek. "He's so small," she whispered. "Daddy, we can't leave them." Ethan looked at his daughter, her small hand, her trembling lip, and felt something shift inside him. The wall he'd built around his heart for 3 years began to crumble. When the paramedics arrived, they checked the baby quickly. "He'll be fine," one of them said, "but they'll need a shelter tonight." At that, the woman's body tensed. "No shelters!" she cried. "Please, not again. They stole my bag last time. I just need a little time, that's all." The paramedic hesitated, then looked at Ethan. "Sir, maybe you can—" "I'll handle it," Ethan interrupted quietly. He met the woman's gaze. "Then you're coming with us, both of you." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You don't even know me." He almost smiled. "Maybe not. But I know what it's like to lose someone." She stared at him, too tired to protest. Her grip on the baby tightened, but she nodded weakly. 20 minutes later, the city's noise was a distant hum beneath them. Inside Ethan's penthouse, warmth wrapped around them like a living thing. The glass walls framed the glowing skyline, and the hum of the heater filled the quiet. Anna hurried off to fetch a blanket from her room, her tiny feet padding against the hardwood floor. Ethan led the woman, Roselyn, she'd said her name was, to the couch. "Sit," he said softly. "I'll get you something warm." She nodded, holding her baby close. The coat still draped over her shoulders dwarfed her frame, but it was the only color in her world right now, a rich burgundy against pale exhaustion. When Ethan returned with a cup of tea, she was whispering softly to the child, rocking him slowly, the rhythm of love and fear. Anna came running in, clutching her favorite blanket, yellow with little blue stars. She draped it carefully over the baby. "Here," she said. "It's my lucky one." Roselyn looked up, her eyes filling again. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan stood back for a moment, watching his daughter. The light, the innocence, the heart that refused to forget what kindness meant. He realized something then. Maybe healing didn't come through time or success. Maybe it came through compassion, the same kind his daughter carried so effortlessly. Outside, snow fell silently against the glass, coating the city in a soft, white peace. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan Wilson's home felt warm again. That night, under the falling snow, a single father's act of kindness would set in motion a miracle he didn't see coming, one that would thaw more than just the winter cold. Snowflakes swirled like quiet confessions as Ethan stood frozen, the world narrowing to the trembling figure on the park bench. His breath misted in the cold, every rational fiber in his mind screaming, "Observe, assess, report." But then, Anna's voice cracked through the air, trembling and small. "Daddy?" "She's not moving." Logic shattered. Instinct took over. Ethan hurried across the frosted ground, his heart pounding louder than the wind's moan. Roselyn sat slumped against the iron bench, her thin coat no match for the biting December chill. Her cheeks were raw, her lips split from the cold. The baby in her arms whimpered weakly, more a sigh than a cry. Without thinking, Ethan stripped off his burgundy overcoat and draped it over the infant. The fabric swallowed the child, and Ethan rubbed his gloved hands briskly over the tiny body, desperate to coax warmth back into those fragile limbs. "Hang on, little guy," he murmured, his voice breaking for the first time in years. Anna knelt beside Roselyn, her yellow cap bright against the dull snow. Carefully, she removed it and placed it on Roselyn's lap, as though that small act of kindness could bridge the chasm between comfort and despair. Ethan fumbled for his phone, his breath ragged. "Yes, emergency. City Park, North Bench. Woman and infant. Severe hypothermia. Send help now." His words cut through the air like shards of glass. Roselyn stirred weakly, her cracked lips trembling. "Please." Her voice was a whisper, fragile as the snow around them. "Not the shelter. They'll take my baby." Ethan froze. The words hit him harder than the cold. In that moment, she wasn't a case, a name or a report. She was a mother clinging to the last thread of love she had left. He looked down at her, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt his logic crumble beneath something deeper, something painfully human. Anna tugged at his sleeve, her small eyes wide with tears. "Daddy, don't let them take her." Her plea sliced through him. In the distance, sirens wailed, sharp, metallic, and final. But in Ethan's mind, the sound faded beneath the thunder of his heartbeat. He looked from the trembling woman to the frail child wrapped in his coat, then to his daughter, whose innocence demanded compassion where the world had forgotten it. Ethan's jaw tightened, his breath coming slow and heavy. Somewhere deep inside him, a decision was already forming, irrational, dangerous, but right. As the red lights cut through the falling snow, Ethan knew that once he spoke, there'd be no turning back. Sirens wailed in the distance, but Ethan Wilson had already made a choice that would change his life forever. The ambulance tore through the city streets, its siren a haunting echo of everything Ethan couldn't explain. Snow blurred the windows, streaking the world into white uncertainty. Inside, Ethan sat beside Roselyn and her baby, his coat still wrapped tightly around Jason. Anna clung to his arm, silent and wide-eyed. When they reached the hospital, the bright lights felt harsh, unforgiving. Nurses rushed forward, voices sharp and professional, and hands reached for the baby. "No!" Roselyn's cry pierced the sterile air. "Please, don't take him from me. I'm fine. I just need warmth." Her desperation silenced the room for a moment. Her eyes were wild, protective, pleading. Ethan saw in them something raw and sacred, the fierce instinct of a mother who had lost too much already. "Ma'am, you need rest," a nurse said gently, but her tone carried the practiced detachment of someone who had seen this too often. She turned to Ethan. "Sir, you can leave her here. Social services will handle it." That word, social services, hung heavy in the air. Ethan knew what it meant. Forms, case numbers, separation. A system that rarely mended what it broke. He looked back at Roselyn. Her hands shook as she held her baby closer, as though daring anyone to take him. And then it happened. That quiet, impossible pull again. The part of Ethan Wilson that analyzed human behavior suddenly felt it instead. Logic told him to walk away, but compassion anchored him to the spot. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Then come with me," he said softly. "You and your baby. I'll get you warm, safe, fed." Roselyn's breath hitched. She blinked, uncertain if she'd heard him right. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," Ethan replied, his tone steady but kind. "You just need a place to breathe again." Her eyes darted between him and the baby, fear and hope warring in her expression. "People have said things like that before," she whispered, voice trembling. "And I ended up on the street again." Ethan didn't move closer. He just nodded toward Jason, whose faint whimpering filled the silence. Then let me prove I mean it. For him. The baby let out a soft cry, and something inside Roselyn broke. Exhaustion, fear, trust, they all merged into one fragile nod. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Hours later, the elevator doors opened into Ethan's high-rise condo. Warmth enveloped them immediately, a striking contrast to the freezing night they'd come from. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, golden and endless. Roselyn hesitated at the threshold, her shoes dripping melted snow onto the marble floor. Her coat was threadbare, her hands cracked from cold. Everything about her seemed out of place in this world of quiet luxury. "Come in," Ethan urged gently, setting down the baby carrier. "You're safe here." Anna darted forward, her bright energy filling the silence. "You can stay in the guest room, and Jason can sleep in my old crib." She grabbed Roselyn's hand, tugging her toward the hallway with childlike excitement. Roselyn blinked back tears as she followed. You're too kind." While Anna showed the baby the stuffed animals on her shelf, Ethan moved quietly through the kitchen. He boiled water, stirred soup, and tried to calm the storm of questions in his mind. What was he doing? He barely knew this woman. But every time he thought of her trembling hands on that bench, he knew walking away hadn't been an option. When he returned with a tray of tea and steaming soup, Roselyn was sitting on the couch, her baby nestled against her chest. The faintest color had returned to her cheeks. She looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Ethan," he said softly, setting the tray beside her. "And that's Anna." Roselyn smiled faintly, glancing toward the hallway, where Anna hummed a lullaby to Jason's stuffed bear. "She's sweet," she murmured. Ethan nodded. "She's got a big heart. Gets it from her mother." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and for a moment the air went still. Roselyn lowered her gaze, sensing the unspoken ache behind his calm exterior. "She must have been wonderful," she said gently. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he sat across from her, watching as Jason finally drifted into a peaceful sleep. Snow fell quietly outside the window, soft flakes catching the city's golden light. Roselyn exhaled, her body finally relaxing into the couch. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You already did," Ethan replied. "You trusted me." In that quiet room, where warmth hummed against the cold, they both knew something had shifted. Two strangers, bound by a single act of mercy, had crossed a line that neither logic nor fate could undo. And for the first time in years, Ethan Wilson didn't feel alone. The city had long gone to sleep when the Wilson condo settled into silence. Outside, snow blanketed the streets like a fresh start no one dared to claim. Inside, the soft hum of the heater filled the air with warmth that still couldn't quite touch the loneliness resting in Ethan's chest. Roselyn stood in the bathroom, steam curling upward as she bathed Jason for the first time in days. The baby's faint whimpers had turned to quiet coos, his cheeks slowly regaining color. She cradled him gently, smiling through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "There we go, my little fighter," she whispered. "You're safe now." Ethan lingered in the hallway, unseen, one shoulder against the wall. His eyes softened as he watched the small scene unfold. Mother and child bathed in the golden bathroom light. Something deep inside him stirred, a place he hadn't touched in years. The memory hit him like a slow ache. His late wife, Lila, sitting in a hospital bed, sweat-drenched and exhausted, holding Anna for the first time. He could still hear her laugh through the fog of time. Fragile, breathless, full of wonder. "Look at her, Ethan," she had said, tracing their daughter's tiny fingers. "She's our forever." But forever hadn't lasted. Cancer had taken Lila just 2 years later, leaving Ethan with silence, spreadsheets, and a daughter too young to understand why Mommy never came home. He'd buried his grief in work, in logic, in control. Anything to avoid feeling unbearable. Now, watching Roselyn hum softly to her child, those old wounds reopened with startling clarity. She wasn't Lila, but the tenderness, the sheer, unstoppable force of a mother's love, pulled him back into memories he thought he'd outgrown. He turned away before she noticed, retreating to the kitchen where the kettle whistled softly. As he poured 2 cups of tea, he caught his reflection in the glass window. Tired eyes, unspoken guilt. Maybe this was his punishment, to save others because he couldn't save the one person who mattered most. A soft voice broke his thoughts. "I didn't mean to take over your bathroom." Ethan turned to find Roselyn standing hesitantly in the doorway, Jason asleep in her arms. Her hair was damp, her face pale but peaceful. She looked cleaner, lighter, though the weariness in her eyes remained. "You didn't," Ethan said quietly, offering her a seat. "You needed it." She smiled faintly and sat at the table, rocking Jason gently in her arms. Ethan pushed a cup of tea toward her. "Chamomile. Helps calm the nerves." She nodded gratefully, taking a small sip, but her hands trembled slightly, and she noticed Ethan's gaze linger. She mistook it for judgment, the kind she'd seen in too many eyes since her life unraveled. "You don't have to pity me," she murmured, looking down. "I know what it looks like. A homeless woman with a baby, showing up at a stranger's door. You're kind, but I get it." Ethan shook his head slowly. "You don't have to explain anything." But something in his voice, too soft, too understanding, made her eyes glisten. Maybe it was the first time someone hadn't looked at her like a problem to be solved. "I should explain," she whispered. "You deserve that much." Ethan didn't interrupt. He simply listened as Roselyn began to unravel the pieces of her story, each word trembling like it might collapse under its own weight. "I was a nurse," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the hum of the heater. 3 years at St. Clair's Hospital. I loved it. I loved helping people. Then one day, I noticed the billing records weren't matching what we were actually doing. Patients were being charged for treatments they never got, surgeries that never happened. She paused, gripping her tea tighter. I thought I was doing the right thing when I reported it. I thought someone would thank me. Her laugh was brittle, a sound that held no joy. They didn't. They fired me. Said I was trying to start trouble. My husband couldn't handle the fallout. Said I'd ruined us. He left a week later. Ethan's chest tightened as he watched her fight back tears. After that, rent went unpaid, bills piled up. I applied everywhere. But once you're branded a troublemaker in healthcare, no one wants you. I sold what I could. The rest just disappeared. I kept telling myself it was temporary. But temporary became years. Her voice cracked on the last word. She looked down at Jason's tiny hand, curled against her chest. He doesn't deserve this. I just wanted him to have something better. I tried. I really did. For a long time, Ethan said nothing. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second stretching between them like a fragile thread. Then he leaned forward, his tone low but full of conviction. "You're not weak," he said quietly. Roselyn blinked, startled by the firmness in his voice. "You're not weak," he repeated, holding her gaze. "You just need someone to stop the world for you, just for a moment, so you can breathe again." The words landed like a balm on an open wound. Roselyn covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks, but for once she didn't apologize for them. She just cried, softly, freely, as though her body was finally allowed to let go. Ethan sat across from her, unmoving, allowing the silence to speak for him. In that silence, something shifted. Not romance, not yet, but the fragile beginning of trust. After a while, Roselyn wiped her eyes and whispered, "You have no idea how long it's been since someone looked at me like I wasn't broken." Ethan's voice softened. "Maybe because you're not." Jason stirred slightly, letting out a sleepy sigh. Roselyn adjusted him gently, her movements tender and precise. The way she held him, so full of care even in exhaustion, filled the room with a quiet grace. "Thank you, Ethan," she murmured. He looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes flickered something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, small but alive. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Just rest tonight, that's all." As Roselyn disappeared down the hall toward the guest room, Ethan stayed at the table, the half-empty teacups still warm between them. Outside, the city glowed beneath the snowfall, untouched and eternal. But inside, in one quiet apartment, two people scarred by loss had found the faintest spark of peace, one that neither of them dared to name. And as Ethan finally turned off the lights, his last thought before sleep wasn't of logic or duty. It was of a woman who refused to give up, and a baby whose heartbeat reminded him that maybe, just maybe, second chances still existed. Morning sunlight crept softly through the tall glass windows of Ethan's condo, spilling golden warmth across the marble floor. For the first time in years, the air was alive, not with the sterile hum of silence or the low buzz of Ethan's computer, but with the bubbling sound of laughter. Anna's laughter. She sat cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by an assortment of toys, crayons, and a small mountain of baby blankets. Jason giggled in her lap, his tiny hands clapping against a stuffed bear that was twice his size. "See, Jason? That's Mr. Buttons. He doesn't bite," Anna said, her voice full of joy. "You can be my little brother now. Daddy says we always take care of family." Roselyn, standing by the kitchen doorway, froze for a moment. Her lips parted, as if to correct her. "No, sweetie, Jason isn't your brother." But before she could, Ethan appeared beside her, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He caught Roselyn's uncertain look and smiled gently. "Let her say it," he murmured. "Maybe they both need it." Roselyn's protest softened into a sigh. "She's sweet," she whispered, watching Anna carefully wrap a baby blanket around Jason's legs. "She's more like her mother than she knows," Ethan said quietly, his eyes softening. They watched together for a moment. Jason squealed as Anna waved a crayon in front of him like a magic wand. "See, Jason, blue means sky, and yellow, that's for happy days." "Happy days," the baby cooed, as if echoing her. Both adults laughed under their breath. Roselyn turned away, blinking back a sudden sting in her eyes. Happiness, pure and ordinary, had been such a stranger in her world. To see her son surrounded by warmth again was almost too much to bear. Ethan cleared his throat. "You should eat something," he said. "I made pancakes. Or, well, tried to." She smiled faintly. "Tried?" He shrugged. "Anna's the real chef. I just follow orders." At the breakfast table, the 3 of them gathered, Ethan with his steady, quiet presence, Anna, animated and chattering, and Roselyn, still trying to remember what it felt like to belong. Anna dipped her pancake into syrup, humming. "Daddy, can Jason stay forever?" Roselyn nearly choked on her tea. "Oh, no, sweetheart." But Ethan interrupted with a calm smile. "We'll see what we can do." His tone was light, but his eyes carried a depth that made Roselyn's breath catch. After breakfast, Roselyn stood abruptly. "Let me clean up," she said. "It's the least I can do." Ethan shook his head. "You don't have to." "I want to," she insisted, reaching for the plates. But her hands trembled slightly, fatigue still clinging to her. When she nearly dropped a glass, she froze. Shame flooded her face. "I hate this," she whispered, turning away. "I hate feeling useless, like I'm just taking and taking." Ethan stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "You're not taking. You're recovering." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "You don't understand. I've always worked, always stood on my own. I don't know how to just accept." Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. "Then don't start with accepting. Start with being human again. She looked up, startled. Let's start there, he said quietly. No guilt, no debt, just breath, food, and rest. That's enough for today. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Roselyn exhaled shakily and nodded, her eyes softening. Being human again, she repeated, as though testing the words for truth. Anna's laughter broke the quiet. She had discovered that Jason's baby spoon made the perfect paintbrush. Dipping it into a small watercolor set, she dabbed bright swirls of blue and yellow across a sheet of paper. Look, she cried. Jason's painting with me. Ethan chuckled, watching as Jason gurgled and kicked happily, splattering dots of color on his own sleeve. Roselyn smiled, an unguarded, genuine smile. He's never been this happy, she whispered. You've given him something I couldn't. Ethan shook his head. You gave him love. We just added pancakes and crayons. Roselyn laughed, a sound light and trembling, but real. For a moment, Ethan's condo, once cold and pristine, felt alive with warmth. Anna ran to them proudly, holding up her masterpiece. It's our family, she declared. Roselyn glanced down. There were 4 stick figures, one tall man in a red coat, one woman in a long dress, a small girl with yellow hair, and a baby with a blue blob of paint for a head. See, Anna said, pointing. That's Daddy. That's me. That's Miss Roselyn. And that's Jason. We're all together. Ethan felt something inside him shift, a flicker of joy, painful in its simplicity. He met Roselyn's gaze, and in her eyes he saw the same quiet ache. For the first time in years, the condo didn't feel like a museum of grief. It felt lived in, alive. As the day stretched on, the snow outside fell thicker, wrapping the city in silence. Inside, laughter mingled with the smell of tea and syrup. Anna hummed lullabies while Jason dozed on her lap. Roselyn leaned back on the couch, exhaustion tugging gently at her eyes. Ethan watched her, a soft smile ghosting across his face. For a fleeting moment, the 3 of them, 4, really, looked like something whole. And though no one said it out loud, each of them felt the same quiet truth settling in the air, like the falling snow outside. Something new had begun to take root, fragile, uncertain, but warm enough to thaw even the coldest parts of their hearts. The afternoon light dimmed into a soft gray as snow began to fall again over the city. Ethan was in his office, voice low and measured on a conference call, while Anna played quietly with Jason in the living room. Roselyn was folding a few of her things, small tokens of order in a life that had known too much chaos, when a voice drifted from the kitchen counter. It was Ethan's phone. His assistant, Claire, spoke over speaker, unaware that the line had not fully disconnected. You're really letting a homeless woman stay with you? A pause, then a quiet laugh. You've got the biggest heart in Chicago, or the biggest risk. Be careful, Ethan. The words pierced through Roselyn like ice. She froze, Jason's half-folded blanket clutched in her hand. For a moment, the warmth of the condo, the laughter, the tea, the gentle kindness, felt like an illusion, something she had trespassed into. Her throat tightened. Pride and humiliation tangled in her chest until breathing hurt. That night, when the city's skyline shimmered faintly beneath the snow, Roselyn stood by the window holding Jason close, his tiny fingers curled against her neck, his breath soft and trusting. You deserve better than being someone's charity, she whispered, her voice breaking. She laid him down for a moment and scribbled a note on a torn piece of paper. The words came trembling, raw. Thank you for everything. I can't stay where I don't belong. She placed it neatly on the counter beside the half-finished sketch Anna had made that morning. Then, bundling Jason in her coat, she slipped out the door into the icy wind. The night bit at her face. The city was quiet except for the low hum of traffic and the distant hiss of falling snow. Jason whimpered against her chest, his small body trembling. "Shh, baby. It's okay," she murmured, though she could barely convince herself. Each breath she took came out in clouds, each step heavier than the last. Back inside, Ethan stirred awake to the sound of crying. Not Jason's, but Anna's. "Dad, she's gone," she sobbed, clutching the note in her small hands. "She left, Daddy." Ethan's blood ran cold. He didn't stop to think, just grabbed his coat and keys and bolted into the storm. Minutes later, he found her. Near the same café bench where they had first met, Roselyn stood hunched against the cold, clutching Jason as if the wind might steal him away. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. "Roselyn," Ethan said softly, stepping toward her. She turned, startled, guilt and pride flashing in her gaze. "I shouldn't have stayed," she whispered. "You've done enough. You don't have to run anymore," Ethan interrupted gently, his voice deep and steady. "Let us help you find your way back." Something in his tone, tender, unguarded, broke her. Tears spilled freely as her body sagged with exhaustion and relief. Ethan stepped forward and wrapped his coat around her shoulders. Roselyn collapsed against him. Jason nestled safely between them. Snow swirled through the streetlights, soft and endless, just like that night when they first met. But now, the cold no longer meant despair. This time, it meant home. The days that followed felt gentler, like winter had finally loosened its hold. Ethan arranged for Roselyn and Jason to stay in his guest suite, a quiet corner of his home filled with soft morning light and the faint scent of cedar. It wasn't charity this time. It was trust. Roselyn protested at first, her pride surfacing like a reflex. But Ethan only smiled. "Just until things feel steadier," he said, and something in his calm tone disarmed her. She nodded, too tired to fight kindness any longer. Each morning, the house hummed with quiet routine. Jason's laughter filled the halls, and Anna, ever the little artist, would bring drawings to Roselyn's door, stick figures of the four of them, standing beneath a yellow sun. "You're part of our team now," she'd say proudly, handing over each crayon masterpiece. Those small gestures did something time and comfort alone could not. The shadows that had lingered under Roselyn's eyes began to fade. Her laughter, light and hesitant at first, returned. One morning, Ethan found her in the kitchen, hair loosely tied, humming while stirring oatmeal for the kids. The sound made him pause mid-step. It wasn't grand or loud, but it filled the space like sunlight. A week later, with Ethan's help, she was offered a volunteer position at a local community clinic. It wasn't glamorous, but as soon as she stepped through those glass doors, she felt something stir deep inside her. A quiet recognition. This was who she used to be. Someone who healed, who listened, who gave without expecting anything in return. The clinic staff welcomed her warmth, her patience. By the end of her first day, she'd helped an elderly man fill out his prescription form and bandaged a child's scraped knee. When she walked home that evening, cheeks flushed from the cold, she caught herself smiling. It wasn't forced. It was real. Ethan noticed the change. Some nights he'd find her sitting on the porch, a cup of tea steaming in her hands. They'd talk about life, about fear, about starting again. Sometimes they said nothing at all. Just sat together as the city lights flickered like stars below. There was no declaration, no grand gesture. Just quiet understanding. Two souls, each mending something broken within themselves. One evening, as Anna and Jason dozed on the couch after a movie, Roselyn turned to Ethan. "You've done so much," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." He looked at her, eyes soft. "You already have," he said simply. Outside, snow fell again, gentle, forgiving. But this time, the cold didn't bite. This time, it felt like peace. Christmas morning arrived quietly. No grand fanfare, just soft carols drifting through the air and the smell of cinnamon rolls filling Ethan's condo. Light poured through the tall windows, washing the room in gold. For the first time in years, it felt like home. Ethan had insisted Roselyn and Jason join them for breakfast. She had hesitated, nervous as always about intruding on what she still thought of as their space. But when Anna came bounding down the hall in her red pajamas, shouting, "It's Christmas! You have to come!" Roselyn couldn't say no. Jason giggled in her arms as they entered the living room. The tree shimmered with silver ribbons, gifts scattered beneath it. Ethan stood by the fireplace, smiling quietly, a mug of cocoa in hand. "Merry Christmas," he said, his voice warm enough to melt the frost outside. They ate together, Anna talking nonstop, Jason clapping along to her laughter, Roselyn still half in disbelief at the simple, perfect normalcy of it all. Then Anna jumped up, excitement bursting from her small frame. "Wait! I made something!" She ran to the tree and came back holding a small, glittering package. "For you," she said, placing it in Roselyn's hands. Roselyn unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a little snow globe. 4 tiny clay figures stood inside. One tall man, one little girl, a woman with kind eyes, and a baby in her arms. On the base, in messy but proud handwriting, were the words, "Dad, me, you, baby." Roselyn's breath caught. Her vision blurred. "Oh, Anna," she whispered, her voice trembling. Tears welled up and rolled freely down her cheeks. Anna frowned for a moment. "You don't like it?" Roselyn shook her head quickly, pulling the girl into her arms. "I love it," she said, voice breaking. "I love it so much." Ethan watched them quietly, something in his chest tightening. Then he reached into his pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. "There's one more gift," he said softly. Roselyn looked up, puzzled. "What is this?" "Open it," Ethan said. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open, and froze when she saw the letterhead, Wilson Health Foundation. It was a job offer, a full-time nursing position with housing support. She looked up at him in disbelief. "Ethan, this—" He shook his head gently. "It's not charity," he said. "It's a chance. To stand again. To do what you were born to do." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The tears came again, but this time they weren't from sorrow. They were from release, from hope. That night, the 4 of them stepped outside together. Snow fell softly, dusting their coats, glimmering under the streetlights. It was the same kind of snow as the night they met, but everything had changed. Jason gurgled in Roselyn's arms. Anna held Ethan's hand, and for the first time in a long time, no one felt alone. The world was still cold, but around them, it felt like Christmas. The park was quieter than usual that afternoon, as if the world itself had slowed down to watch the snow fall. The same bench still stood near the cafe window, weathered, unremarkable, yet sacred in a way only they could understand. Ethan pushed the stroller slowly through the light blanket of snow. Jason cooed from inside, bundled up in his familiar blue onesie. Anna skipped ahead, twirling with her yellow scarf fluttering behind her like a ribbon of sunlight. The air was cold, crisp, but somehow softer than before. Roselyn followed beside them. Her gloved hands tucked into the burgundy coat Ethan had once wrapped around her shivering body. She could still remember that night, the desperation, the ache, the fear that no one would stop to help. And yet, here they were now. The same spot, the same snow, but a different world entirely. When they reached the bench, Ethan brushed away a thin layer of frost before gesturing for her to sit. She hesitated, glancing at the familiar cracks in the wood. "It feels strange being back here," she whispered. "Strange how?" Ethan asked, lowering himself beside her. She smiled faintly. "Like meeting the ghost of who I used to be." Ethan said nothing for a moment. Then, without a word, he reached behind him and pulled off his burgundy coat, draping it around her shoulders again. The gesture was simple, quiet, but it carried the weight of everything they'd been through. Roselyn looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You never stop doing that," she said softly. "Doing what?" "Making people feel seen." Ethan smiled, looking out toward the snow-covered path where Anna and Jason played. "Maybe it's because I used to forget how to see myself." For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of children's laughter filled the air. Anna pretending to chase Jason's tiny mittened hands, Jason responding with bubbling giggles that echoed like wind chimes. "Sometimes," Roselyn said quietly, "I think about that night. I was so sure no one would come. I almost didn't look up when you stopped." "I almost didn't stop," Ethan admitted, his voice low. "It was cold, late. I told myself it wasn't my place." He sighed, shaking his head. But something about Anna's voice, her saying, "Daddy, she's cold," it cut through everything. The rules, the logic, all of it. Roselyn turned to him. "And now?" He glanced at her, a small reflective smile curving his lips. "Now I know maybe we all needed saving that night." She inhaled sharply, her chest tightening at the truth in his words. For so long, she had thought of herself as the broken one, the woman who'd lost everything, who needed a miracle to survive. But sitting here beside him, with Anna and Jason laughing just a few feet away, she saw it differently. Ethan hadn't just saved her life. He'd rebuilt his own through the act of kindness that night. "Thank you," she whispered suddenly. He looked at her, brow furrowed. "For what?" "For not walking past. For reminding me that compassion still exists. That people still do." Ethan looked down, humbled. "You remind me every day that hope can come from anywhere, even from someone sitting on a frozen bench." Their eyes met. No grand gestures, no declarations, just quiet understanding. The sky above began to dim as twilight painted the snow in shades of silver and violet. Roselyn reached into her bag and pulled out a small sketchbook, its cover worn and edges curled from use. She had started sketching again, something she hadn't done in years. Ethan leaned over slightly as she flipped to a blank page. "What are you drawing?" "Our beginning," she said softly. Her pencil moved gracefully, tracing shapes and shadows, the outline of the old bench, the slope of Ethan's shoulders as he sat beside her, Anna twirling nearby, Jason in her lap. With each line, the image came alive, a moment captured in graphite and memory. Ethan watched her hand move, mesmerized by how calm she looked. "You're really good at that," he murmured. She smiled without looking up. "It's easier to draw what you love." He wanted to reply, but didn't. Instead, he watched her sketch until she stopped and turned the book so he could see. There they were, 4 silhouettes beneath a curtain of falling snow. A father, his daughter, a mother, and her child. No titles, no roles, just a family forged in compassion. Roselyn looked at the drawing for a long time, then closed the book gently, as if sealing the moment inside. "I used to believe miracles were things that happened to people," she said. "Now I think they happen through them." Ethan nodded slowly. "Through us." Snow began to fall more heavily now, soft flakes catching in their hair and coats. Anna ran up to them, cheeks flushed pink, giggling as she tried to catch snowflakes on her tongue. Jason squealed in delight from his stroller. Ethan stood, taking Roselyn's hand to help her up. "Come on," he said, his voice warm despite the chill. "Let's take them home." She hesitated just long enough to look back at the bench one last time, the place that had seen her at her weakest, and now at her strongest. A place where despair had turned into something sacred. She smiled softly. "Goodbye," she whispered, not to the bench, but to the woman she had been that night. Ethan noticed, but didn't ask. Some goodbyes didn't need explaining. As they walked away, their footprints formed a trail of 4 distinct paths that eventually merged into one. Behind them, the snow fell steadily, covering the marks they left, but not erasing the story written there. And on that quiet winter evening, the world seemed to pause again, just long enough to witness the miracle of 4 lives intertwined beneath falling snow. A father and his daughter, a mother and her child, bound not by blood, but by something far stronger. The simple, timeless miracle of warmth.